sites in the chat.
All right, everyone. I'm going to get started with an introduction for Heidi. I would like to welcome Heidi Dugi to our My Journey series, speaker series. She is a medical student at Oregon Health and Science University School of Medicine in Portland, Oregon. She's currently developing research projects both in determining benefits of screening for H. pylori to reduce gastric cancer prevalence and the quality of patient-provider interactions for H. pylori treatment in Indigenous communities. Go ahead, Heidi, take it away.
Hey, hi. Like Carolina said, I'm a medical student at OHSU in Portland, Oregon. And just to kind of establish kinship, if I can see that there's some Navajo listeners, so I'm going to introduce myself in Navajo. Yat eshe Heidi Dugi inishye, Twitchitni Nishle, Tetnisethni Bushishchin, Kinsa Chitni Dashiche, do Bipatotni Dashinella. And so I'm very happy to be here to speak to you all. And I'm also very grateful that I had this opportunity. So let me get started with this. Okay, so I have my clans down here. So I grew up in Tuba City, Arizona, and this seems like so long ago, like when I see the years, they just fly by. And I went to Tuba City High School, and where I graduated, and I think that these were kind of the formative years of my science interests, and I think that I had some really great STEM teachers when I was in high school, and they kind of like facilitated that interest that I had in math and science and also medicine. And so I went to college at the University of Arizona, where I did Bachelor of Science in Health Science. And I believe it's public health now at the Mel and Enid Zuckerman College of Public Health. But so between my graduation from high school and my graduation from undergrad, there was a lot of growth and a lot of, I guess, different factors that were kind of going on in my life that helped me to really kind of, you know, get an idea of just how challenging it is, how college would be. And there was also a lot of like things I experienced, like loneliness and trying to find my community and just learning so much about the world and becoming an adult and also becoming a parent. And so that's why I put that little star there, that it was a very challenging time for me. But also after I graduated from my undergrad program, I went back to work for a while, and I'll talk about this in the next slide, but I wanted to go back to school and do an MPH program because I felt like I really wanted to challenge myself in trying to become a leader in health programs and trying to kind of like maybe get into research. Research wasn't really something that I like had experience in, but it's something that I wanted to test the waters and kind of see what it was like. So that's when I decided to go back to grad school after several years of working. And then, so since I was young, I've always had that dream of going to medical school and becoming a physician. And so during my MPH years, that's when I kind of solidified some goals and objectives for myself that I wanted to pursue this path to medicine. And so I applied to this PMAP program, which is still in place at the UA College of Medicine. And it was also a really challenging and very different type of approach to learning that was very new to me. And I think that it taught me a lot about what would be forthcoming from medical school. And so that was a really great experience for me. And then when I finished the PMAP program, I had tried to get into the U of A College of Medicine conditionally with there was a requirement for an MCAT score, and I'll be honest, I didn't meet that score, which was like one of the biggest challenges of getting into med school for me. It just seemed impossible at the time, and I had more than one chance at trying to get my MCAT score higher, but it just wasn't. You know, it just seemed like that obstacle for me that I couldn't get over. And so when PMAP was over, I decided to kind of work for a little bit in between for a year, and then also applied to another program called the White East program, which is in Portland, Oregon. And that is with the OHSU NNACoE, which is, I believe it's Native Center of Excellence. That I know it's not the whole name, but I have a website down at the end of the presentation. But it's basically another post-bac program, and there are some, you know, requirements, and I went through that program, and that also really helped me to, you know, build my confidence that I can succeed in medical school. And so both of these programs had cohort, you know, they built their programs with a cohort structure. And so I've always had people who were my peers that we kind of stuck together, and we could get through really challenging experiences together. And then so my graduation date will be in 2025. So hopefully I'll be a family medicine or internal medicine physician in 2025. So go to the next slide. And I just want to say that there was a lot of challenges, some things that, you know, little details that I didn't mention, both being like a first generation medical student, graduate student, and also parent, trying to get through all of those things. It definitely wasn't easy, but you know, I had to try to find resources and networks to try and help me get through all of that, and as well as, you know, support from family and friends and the community there. So that was super important. So I think that my work experiences really solidified why I wanted to become a physician. And so one of the first positions that I took when I got out of college as an undergrad was being a family support specialist. And I realized that it's really important for families, especially children, to kind of have a really good head start, or, you know, having that foundation of health and well-being as soon as, like, even the prenatal years, before the mom knows that she's pregnant, when she's carrying, and all of those things are just super important. So that's kind of like what I did, which is, I guess, has a public health, you know, foundation. I also kind of got into like teaching like health education as well in that position, teaching about the ACEs, or the adverse childhood experiences study, and how that's important in that work. And then I kind of, when I left the program, I wanted to focus a little more on the adults. So like chronic health issues in my community, and diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure. And so that's when I got into more health educator roles. And it's there where I learned about like the diabetes prevention program, how important that is in for people who have that pre-diabetes diagnosis, and kind of clarifying what that means for the patient and what they can do to avoid a diabetes diagnosis down the road. And then when I decided to leave Tuba City, which is my hometown, I wanted to move back to an urban area because I kind of wanted to make my way again, like I said, back to the MPH program in either Phoenix or Tucson. And so I started working for the Gila River Indian community as a community educational specialist. And it was pretty much the same kind of health educator role in the community. And that's always really fun for me. And then I moved on to a diabetes health educator at Fort McDowell Yavapai Nation. And again, working with that same SDPI grant. I believe it's Special Diabetes Program for Indians, which is, they receive their funding from Congress, I think every year, and kind of report their grant objectives and stuff like that. And so that's kind of what I was doing in Tuba City as well. But it's there where I really started to meet with patients with the physician, and I could kind of get an idea of what the patients were experiencing. I remember this one patient who really stuck out to me, and they just had so many things going on in their life, and it wasn't really helping with their health. And it's kind of like that iceberg analogy where you can kind of see like what's going on physically when they come into the clinic, and it's kind of based on what they tell you is like, this is hurting, or something's not right with me physically. But then, when they go back home, there could be, issues with domestic violence or substance abuse, or just, multiple things happening. And so this particular patient had not really shared that with their physician. And I kind of feel like them sharing that with me, maybe it was that they felt a little more comfortable sharing that with me. And I really wasn't sure why this patient was sharing all of these, different things that were going on. And maybe because I had more time to spend with them, or maybe because the diabetes and the chronic health issues were kind of all wrapped around all of these, health and family issues that they were having. And so that was kind of one of the things that drove me to think about health inequities and health disparities on a much larger level. And that's exactly what I was learning about when I became an MPH student, was how all of these different things really impact people. And that's kind of what I directed my attention to when I was in graduate school. And so these positions, they really did, help me kind of see things from a patient point of view, but also from a community point of view, specifically tribal communities, and kind of what their needs are, and how I wanted to help. And so this is also kind of like how I supported myself through graduate school, if anybody is interested. And sometimes when you get into a master's program, your program, if they have the resources or the funding, they will offer teaching assistantships or research assistantships. And so being, my family, I had my family, and so I took these opportunities to gain some teaching experience, and also kind of see if I wanted to pursue like a PhD path, to see like what was in store there. And so I kind of got a little glimpse of that. And then between my graduate teaching assistantships was when I decided to pursue medicine. And so my work at the Cancer Center was basically being like a support, administrative support to cancer clinical trials. And so I would work closely with IRB and trying to make sure that protocols were updated for clinical trials. And so there's a lot of work that goes on in the background, is what I learned for cancer clinical trials. And but I always was excited to see, like how the oncology teams would interact with patients, and even the disparities that existed for cancer patients at the U of A Cancer Center. There was very little, I guess, opportunities for Native Americans from Arizona to come to the cancer center, and that could be like many different barriers. And so I kind of saw that firsthand, how difficult it could be for someone who was diagnosed with maybe a rare cancer disorder, or who was kind of struggling to get through their cancer diagnosis. And so these are my research experiences. My very first kind of experience was during my MPH program. I had heard about Dr. Carletta Chief's efforts to kind of put this multifaceted project together. It was just, there was, I think, like 5 or 6 maybe co-PIs on this project, and it involved the Gold King mine spill, which happened in, I think it was 2016 or 2000. I might be way off, but basically there was a mine spill that happened in Colorado, and a bunch of like toxic mine waste flowed down into the San Juan River, which goes through the Navajo Nation. So if you're familiar with the San Juan River, it goes through like Farmington and Shiprock. These are agricultural communities on the Navajo reservation, and even smaller rural areas like Upper Fruitland, New Mexico. And so they use that water to feed their livestock and their crops, and they sell these at local food markets or farmers markets, and they also sell them through like these other organizations in those communities. And so as a student, I wanted to see what people's risks perceptions were from the spill. And so even though there might not be like a physical risk, like if scientists don't find that there's high enough levels of this metal or that metal, it still impacts the community's perception of the water. And so people definitely were affected by what they thought about the water, if they could use it. And it kind of turned people away from using the water, which, is really sad, because they do use it for other things like ceremonies, and, they use it for prayers and things like that. And so that is kind of taking one of the aspects away from Navajo culture, is that they can't practice their culture in that way. And so that was a really great experience for me. It kind of got me into like, oh, this is what like research is in a community led. I guess it was just different for me from what I had known about what research is. And this is definitely something that I would really like to return to at some point in the future, is something more community based and participatory. I just think that everybody could, learn from something like this, including me. So that was really great for me. And then Dr. B had mentioned the Step Up program, which I also did. And I think that this program is excellent. It really helped me to learn about some of the research methods that I wasn't formally introduced to in school. And so public health is kind of a little different from kind of like, so the research that I do now in medical school is a little different from public health. And I think the Step Up program helped me to kind of integrate them together and understand like what would be expected of me when I get into medical school. And so when I was in Dr. Juanita Merchant's lab, I did more of like lab research, kind of getting an idea of what lab research is and how the lab meetings go, talking about data through lab meetings and doing things like that. And then with Dr. Lindsay Kohler, I also got a little taste of like what epi research is and learning more about the sciences and the methods that go into that. And she also helped me with some biostatistical skills that I feel like I needed, and learning more about like STATA programs and how to run them, and just, you know, tips and things like that that a mentor would share with you. And so I think that really helped me to prepare for when I left to Portland that same exact summer. So that was really great. And then now I'm focused on a scholarly research project, which is required by my school at OHSU. And so this is kind of in development. I'm really interested in gastrointestinal health, and especially in tribal communities. And so I wanted to see what the effectiveness would be for screening for H. pylori. And there's some prevalence of the bacteria in the Pacific Northwest and Alaska, and also here on the Navajo Nation. And I know a couple studies that are going on right now to look at that. And so I kind of want to implement or try to see the same thing in the Pacific Northwest. And then also I kind of wanted to look at the quality of those patient-provider interactions for H. pylori treatment. I know it's like a long drawn out treatment, and there's three different antibiotics that patients have to take, and sometimes it can be really difficult to get through it. And so I wanted to kind of look more at that, and it's still in development. And so I'm hoping to work with some of the Native organizations in Portland to see how I can develop this a little bit more. And so that's my research experience. And some people, especially, you know, when I was going through the interview process for medical school, they always ask, like, why do you want to go into medicine? Why not, you know, some other health profession? And I have this, you know, really deep tie to my community. Even coming back here, it's always emotional driving through the desert and coming back to my home. You can kind of, you know, feel it. You can feel it in my chest that I feel relief. And so I know that my experiences here and in healthcare systems, including the IHS, urban areas, all of those things kind of impacted why I wanted to go into medicine. Just the level of care, the quality of care, what community members have to say about the healthcare system that they use. There's sometimes positive and negative feedback, and you know, as students wanting to go into those healthcare provider roles, I think we always want to make improvements in our community, and also addressing the health disparities and inequities that exist in the communities. There's always some way that we can try to address these. And one of the things, you know, that we want to improve on is just, you know, the cultural appreciation and understanding of the people that are here. When I was younger, and of course, you know, personally, when my grandmother had a lot of chronic health issues, and so it was very hard for her to understand sometimes what doctors were trying to communicate to her about her health. And so that's one of the things that I'm interested in those patient provider interactions is how is that going, and is there understanding and communication going on? How does the patient feel? How does the physician feel? So there's just so much that I think we can kind of take apart from those meetings, and as well as trying to promote more Indigenous healthcare providers. And this also ties back into that cultural appreciation and understanding, and trying to show that patients that you want to try and heal them, or if they need help with anything else, trying to connect them with the necessary people. And my family, I think, is an important reason why. So personally, these impacts from all of the things that I said, we are no exception. My family has also been impacted by chronic illness, cancer, motor vehicle accidents, and substance abuse. And all of these things kind of tie back to why I want to help, because just like, you know, my community in Tuba City, there's also the same kinds of disparities that exist all over the Navajo Nation, as well as other tribes in Oregon, Washington, the Pacific Northwest in general, and, you know, Midwestern United States. And these are all the things that we try to address as healthcare providers, because after med school, we're not really sure where we'll end up, but I'm hoping that I'll be in some place where I can contribute to tribal health in some way. And so this was kind of first generation college student, things that I kind of had to learn along the way, and I've stumbled a lot trying to get through some of these things. Finances, some of the things that really helped me get through was having, you know, a great financial aid department at my college who kind of understand kind of what kinds of barriers that I faced, and what kinds of, I guess, hurdles that I had to jump through for my scholarships to go, you know, for me to get them in time. And this was really important for me. And I didn't really realize it until after I was done with school, is that financial aid can sometimes be a hindrance to a lot of students, and it can be really stressful. So I always remember to ask a lot of questions, and even asking my peers questions about, like, you know, where they get their financial aid, like scholarships and stuff. And so that was really important for me to know the ropes, and academics as well. This was a little bit hard for me because I wasn't really the kind of person to ask for help. I was very introverted, and I still am to this day, but I am more willing now to kind of go out and ask for help when I need it. And this is really important in medical school as well. So like, just if there's free tutoring somewhere, I'll go and seek it out. Or if someone can help me out with something, like a friend or a study buddy, all of these things are important. So I also found that I have to be an advocate for myself, and as well as, you know, my peers, because sometimes something that I had always wanted when I was just coming into undergrad was a peer who could, you know, really help me. And maybe it was my own introvertedness, or my like lack of proactiveness, is to, you know, go out and ask for help. Or and I wish that I had advocated a little more just for myself. And then as I became an older student, I tried to advocate for students who are just coming in to this new place. And so if they need any help, I try to help out any way I can. And so Community is also important, which ties into the mental health piece. And I think anybody who has gone through, well, I guess academia in itself, whether it's undergrad, graduate, or professional health students, it can take a toll on your mental health because you kind of have to step away from family and friends to make sure that you're passing, and that your stuff before, you can have fun. And finding community to get through that is really important as well. So those are the two really important things that I'm finding out about now. And then when things get really tough, I try to remember why I'm on this journey, because it can seem like for us, we take tests every week, and taking tests week after week and studying every day, it kind of wears on you. And so just remembering why you're there, and it helps a little bit to get your focus. And so failure as well. I think failure was a huge part of my journey. I didn't pass, or I didn't get the MCAT score that I wanted. I didn't go right into my MPH program after my undergrad years. I had gained and lost scholarships when I was an undergrad as well. I think that's one thing that is really hard to face, is when I didn't get the grades that I wanted my freshman year of college. And so I had lost scholarships. And so I had to try and apply to many different scholarships to try and get that back. And that's something that a lot of first gen students realize in their first and second years, is that failure is part of, growing as a student. And it's also part of, even now as a medical student, failure is a good way to learn, and so that you try not to repeat those same mistakes again. So just know that failure is something you can bounce back from, and you can learn from it, which is what I try to do. And so when I think about, where I come from and how I try to approach things, this Navajo philosophy of learning is kind of like the scientific method of thinking about something, planning, act, and reflect. And it's kind of what I tried to do when, just doing anything, I guess, like going through school. It's usually something that I employ when I'm thinking about a goal, like a life goal or something. So I have a thought, what do I want to do? And so that's at the top of this little model here. It's called NNACoE, and that's thinking, what do I want to do? So for me, maybe I want to do really well in a block of medical school. So like cardiopulmonary and renal, which is something that's really hard for me. And then you make a plan. So nahat that means you plan, you develop your goals, your objectives, and how you're going to do it. And then you take action with ina, or living. And then sahasin is assuring or reflecting. So how did it go, and how can I improve on that? Which is kind of like scientific method. I like to think of it as kind of figuring things out. Sometimes it doesn't go as well as you think, which is why it's a circular thing and not a linear thing. And so these are some of the resources and scholarships I think that students might be interested in. And these are definitely things that I've taken advantage of in the past, or I've applied for them. And some of the things that really helped me get through my master's program is having my college offer scholarships. And so when I applied for them, sometimes they're based on your need, and sometimes they're based on academics. And so I did get a couple scholarships because I was a mom and supporting my family. And so that's what this is, this scholarship universe, childcare and housing subsidy down here, which is through the U of A. And I think that having this support and knowing that there's resources out there to help you try and get through your academic program, or maybe you want to explore a little bit more. I know that these are all like public health, like medicine based, but there's a lot of research opportunities too. So like the Step Up program. There's also the program that I went through to get into medical school at OHSU, which is this the White East pathway. And if you're a student at U of A, there's the InMed program, which really helped me try and get through the MCAT studying, which was, it's horrible. I'm just, I think MCAT was just like, it was so stressful for me. I can't emphasize that enough. And I also, reached out to my local chapter house, which is what they're called on the Navajo Nation. They offer a scholarship to people who are registered as chapter members. And so if you're a Navajo student and you vote at a chapter house, you can check to see if they have scholarships available for you. So these are all resources that I've used and support. And I think that's one of the main things is people trying to figure out, how am I going to pay for college, or how am I going to pay for childcare? These are, I think, really important things. One thing that I didn't mention was having, the support at home. And so my husband, my partner, he really did help me get through a lot of the challenging times. And I was very lucky to have him there by my side. I know a lot of parents don't really have a partner, but maybe it's your mom or your father, or any parental figure who can offer help. It's really invaluable because when you have children, it makes things a little bit more challenging. But there are ways to finish school even when you have children. So highly recommend these. Okay. So thank you, Ahiha. I'm so glad that you guys were able to listen to my story and let me share it. And hopefully you can take something away from it. If not, that's okay too. I'm still like trying to get through this challenging med school time. So I left my email there if you have any questions. And I hope everybody has a good holiday and has some good food and spends time with their family. So thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. We are gonna toss it over to Lori to talk about evaluations real quick, and then we'll open it up for questions, okay?
Okay.
Lori.
There we go. Now I'm unmuted. Sorry. Okay, I'm gonna pop the evaluation link in the chat box real quick. This is really just a quick 5-minute evaluation about your experience with this talk today, and it really just helps us understand, better understand the impacts of the seminar on students. It's completely anonymous and confidential. And yeah, you don't have to complete it if you do not want to, but it does really help the program. So we hope that you will. All right, let me just send this to everyone. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to email Kelly or I. Our email should be in the evaluation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori. Now we will open up the floor for questions or comments.
I have a
question. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Excellent presentation, Heidi. Heidi and I actually went to high school together, and she's a huge reason why I decided to pursue a Master of Public Health degree at NAU. So I am always happy to support Heidi, and I'm just tremendously proud of what she's doing and all of the accomplishments she's had thus far. But I do have a question. Heidi, while in med school, how important do you think it is in terms of traditional medicine, and how do you combine that with Western medicine? Or have you, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's really important. It's still like a very new for me, and I don't think I've read any like the academic side of me is like I haven't really read any literature on it yet, but you know, from personal experience, I know that it's really important, especially when trying to help patients get through something really difficult, and whether that is like really bad chronic illness or cancer or death. It can be really hard to talk about these things, especially if a provider is not familiar with the culture or the tradition or the do's and don'ts of what you say. And even as a student at OHSU, when I go to follow, you know, the physicians, if I'm on the floor, I always ask them like, well, how do you approach, you know, this topic with this patient? And it kind of helps me to put in my own toolbox what I should say. And, you know, just like Native people are not a monolith, is, you know, the saying is we all have our different traditions and our own languages, our own cultures. They're very different. And so what is okay in one tribe is not okay in another. And so I'm also learning about that when I'm at the Pacific Northwest, is trying to understand the different cultures and teachings that are there and trying to be very respectful. But, you know, just like if I was practicing here in Arizona, if a patient requests any kinds of traditional healer, I'm totally respectful of their wishes, and I will try to do, you know, try to get those resources to them if they feel that it'll make them feel better. If it promotes their healing, then that's something that I would do as a physician, and something that I would recommend to an attending or a resident that I'm working with.
Thank you, Jamie. Laura, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Laura Eichelberger. I'm actually attending this virtually from Anchorage, Alaska, and Diné land. And that was a really, really interesting presentation. And I'm so excited to get to hear about your story and about the work that you've been doing. I work at the Tribal Water Center here at the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, and also for research services. And so I was really interested in the project that you were involved in around the Gold King mine spill, and then also the H. pylori work that you've been doing. And I wondered, you know, we do a lot of work, like community-based work. I'm a medical anthropologist by training. I went to Arizona. And so I was wondering if you had any resources or publications in the works, or something you could share about how you went about doing culturally responsive evaluation of the Gold King mine spill. And then also some of your work around H. pylori. It just sounds really, it really resonates with the issues that our communities here are dealing with, both in terms of distrust of water, and then also our really high rates of gastric cancer and Helicobacter pylori infection.
Thank you. Well, Well, unfortunately, I don't have anything in publication right now. So the H. pylori studies is something that I'm going to be working on throughout my med school years. And so whether it will be like published or unpublished, you know, that's something that I'm hoping I can kind of get my footing on a little bit more with my cancer control and prevention, you know, trying to start on that in my career. But as far as, you know, like the research, it's still very new to me. And a lot of the things I'm still trying to like figure out, and I'm still learning a lot. So that's the H. pylori thing. It's kind of like just a little tiny, a little thing that I'm trying to kind of develop. And so I'm trying to see where it'll go. I know that there are, I've reached out to a couple doctoral students. Actually one, she's at the University of Washington. Her name is Dr. Dornell Pete, and she actually does a lot of research down here because she's also Navajo too. She is working on a study, and that is kind of something that I'm interested in, you know, kind of like collaborating with her and trying to kind of see what we could do together to try and get my projects up off the ground a little bit more. So there's that. And I'm also familiar with the works that U of A has, and I've met with Dr. Robin Harris, who's at the U of A, and she also works in tribal communities. And a lot of the work I think that is being done that I know of is through NAU and U of A. There's a lot of researchers who work together to approach this H. pylori problem. I don't know any offhand. I've met Dr. Harris and Dr. Pete personally, but I haven't really had a chance to reach out to others and to see. I've read a couple, you know, things in the literature, and it seems like the consensus is that nobody's really talking about it right now. It's kind of a new thing that people are just noticing that this is a problem in tribal communities, and maybe we should take a better look at it. So that's kind of where I'm coming in and trying to see like if this is really serious problem and what we can do about it. So the Gold King mine spill, I think it was really important work in, you know, there was many different arms to the study, and I think Dr. Carletta Chief did a really great job in also filling in the community on the results of that study, because I think traditionally, you know, and unfortunately, a lot of studies kind of take data and then they kind of move on. They don't really present like, well, this is what we found and this is what you should be aware of in your community. But you know, there's a lot more researchers, I think, trying to be a little more community involved. And also this study also worked with CHWs, or community health workers in the community, and so they relied very heavily on them, and they did carry a lot of the community outreach workload. And so they wanted to inform community members of what really affects them, if they have any concerns, who they can reach out to, even trying to help community members test their soil if they're concerned about the levels of any kinds of metals that are in their soil near their homes or their farms or whatever. And so that is also a project that I think Dr. Chief is still kind of, I mean, I still see updates from her every now and then, but it's not something that I'm still heavily involved in, unfortunately, but I think it's a really great project. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll let somebody else talk, but just to throw it out there, I was, when I finished my PhD, I was like obsessed with Helicobacter pylori because my work is on inadequate water and sanitation up in Alaska, which is very similar to what is happening on the Navajo Nation. And but I could never get anything off the ground in terms of like community-based research because there's not a really good way of addressing the health disparity. And so it was sort of like, well, I could go and stir up a bunch of trouble and get people really angry about something that then public health officials weren't really ready to address. But I say that because I think you are in a better position. And if I, can help connect you with people who are, at like the National Cancer Institute where I did my postdoc, or I think there's opportunities up here in Alaska as well, if you're interested in, doing something really big. So just to throw that out there.
Thank you. I'll have to get your contact information.
Absolutely. I'll throw it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have time for probably one more question.
There's a question in the chat. So it says, thank you for your presentation and transparency with your struggles, Heidi. I was wondering, did you go into your MPH knowing you would pursue medical school later? I asked because it often feels like it's too late for me to go to medical school because I didn't know this was my interest as I completed my MPH.
This is something like I always ask myself this too, but I have med school peers with me who are actually a little more like a few years older than me. And it's not, non-traditional students are there in medical school, but I feel like they're not at my age, I guess you could say. And it's also something that I do feel insecure about every once in a while. And I'm trying to like let go of that. But definitely med school was something that I had always dreamed about since I was young. But I feel like there was too many obstacles for me. The first thing was just, like research, like what do I do with research? Like, I don't even know what, like the first place to start. Like, do I just go up to a scientist at the university and ask them like to train me? Like, what if I don't like this research project and then I'm just like, doing something that I don't really like, or maybe I don't understand. And so this is where I kind of had to reach out. And this is also like, I'm going to do another plug for Step Up. Is kind of, it kind of allows you to like develop your own journey through research and what interests you. Because there's a lot of, scientists, researchers out there who maybe want to help you try and develop that. And so that was the research thing that I was kind of like, I felt I was a little shaky on. And everybody says, oh, you need research experience to get into med school, which it's not necessarily true. So I had a public health background, and I still, that was still very important to my interviewers and my admissions panel. And so they felt like that was very valuable. And so I never felt like it was too late for me. And I think this is like a personal thing. If you know that you are determined, for me, even though I didn't get that MCAT score, like I didn't pass it a few times, like I still knew inside of me that this is still the path for me. And so I didn't give up studying. I just had to reach out to more people to try and get an idea of how I can change my study habits to try and get this, this MCAT out of the way, because ultimately medicine is like that. Sometimes you run into roadblocks, and research is also like that. But you have to find the resources to try and get you over, those obstacles. So, so don't feel like it's too late. It's still possible. For me, I think it's more of like a community thing. I really want to help my community. I really want to be involved in tribal health. And those things are really important to me. I guess that's my overall goal.
Thank you, Heidi, so much for coming on and giving your talk for my journey for the semester. And I think that is going to be it for our talk. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you so much, Heidi. If you have a minute, I have a potential connection for you.
Okay, great. Thank you.